Hi, we just wanted to give you the first of two case studies to help clarify some of our thinking and how we approached our project of creating an environmental impact assessment tool. We previously just gave you a process overview. The next video will be on another portfolio company where we spend more detail into how to calculate the positive valuation piece. And this video is a little bit more focused on Noir and how you'd screen to make sure that you weren't creating a negative environmental impact. So as usual, we would want to start with the business model and understand the business model. This is obviously intimately linked to the overall investment process. So that's great in that it doesn't entail more work. However, it is essential to be able to understand a company's environmental impact. In this case, KZ Noir both offers technical assistance to farmers and also plays part of the value chain role by buying coffee from these farmers and then selling it to larger market buyers. The second question is whether this company is working in an acceptable industry. We'll circle back. This might seem like a strange question at this point because obviously Acumen is comfortable working in coffee. However, we'll get into this more detail slightly later, but what is normal to an industry becomes extremely important when evaluating how negative or positive a company's environmental impact is, because much of that is relative to the industry. But in this case, we'd say that yes, it's totally acceptable industry. Then we move on to setting supply chain boundaries. And this would be thinking here is that supply chains are long and complex, and sometimes trying to calculate the entire life cycle, doing a complete life cycle analysis of a product would be far beyond the capacity of the company or Acumen. And so, furthermore, it's unclear how much control a company has once you get too far removed from its core operations. So our thinking and our suggestion in the memo is that you obviously always want to incorporate the operations of the company, and then you usually want to consider including one supplier, one stage in the supply chain, upstream and downstream. The thinking being that the company likely has some influence in the situation, though that will vary based on the situation. In the case of KZ Noir, as we can see, we consider upstream, so we consider the cultivation and extraction, the cultivation rather of coffee, as you can see in the gray category called planting and growing, as well as the harvesting and cleaning process, and then the aggregate and reselling. We actually stop our analysis there because we believe that even once you get to packaging or wholesaling the coffee, KZ Noir as a small distributor would have almost no control over that part of the supply chain. So dinging them for what eventually is done with their coffee, if it were to say be put into a Keurig coffee pod, which creates a lot of waste, they don't really have control of that, so they shouldn't be held accountable. Rather, we want to focus on these key categories of planting, growing, harvesting, cleaning, and aggregating and reselling. So moving on, we want to take these three categories that we identified earlier, the stages in the supply chain that we want to focus on, and assess them across our 5 categories, which are water, energy emissions, land use change, hazardous waste, and non-hazardous waste. There's more detail about how to exactly use these categories in the other videos as well as in the memo. For now, I just want to make an example. If we were to go through all these 5 and determine that on a whole that there was a positive environmental impact, that would mean that the KZ Noir would both pass the screen, and we'd actually want to dig in to figure out how positive, because we might want to do a positive valuation. If the impact seemed neutral, then it would pass the screen, but it wouldn't proceed to the positive valuation piece of the impact assessment of the environmental impact assessment. But it would pass the screen, and it would need to make its social impact case. If there was a negative impact, this wouldn't result automatically in a fail. We'd want to dig in more because most processes, all human processes, have some negative impact. So the idea would be to evaluate how negative this was before we'd want to dismiss this company. So moving through these 5 categories, we can, in planting and growing, there's obviously water used, but not a tremendous amount of water used in planting and growing of coffee, nor in energy and emissions. There is a significant amount of land use change. Obviously, the land used to grow the coffee is different than it previously was. There might be some hazardous waste associated with fertilizer and with pesticides, depending on the situation. There would not be much hazardous waste involved. Moving on to harvesting and cleaning. Water use is a big part of the harvesting and cleaning process for coffee, specifically cleaning. Energy emissions would not be that large of a, there'd be some, but not large. Land use change would not be relevant at this point. There would not be much concern of hazardous waste at this point, unless the chemicals were extremely toxic, but that is unlikely. However, there would be, we'd at least want to think about the non-hazardous waste produced in the form of the pods and the shells and the other plant material of coffee. Finally, in the aggregating reselling, which is the core operations of KZ Noir, we don't think there'd be significant water use. There would be energies and emissions associated with warehousing and transportation. There'd be negligible land use change, hazardous waste, or non-hazardous waste. So how to think about these 5 areas of negative impact we've identified. As we mentioned, this just because there's some negative impact, that doesn't mean there's an automatic fail. What we really want to be asking is this normal and is it avoidable? And so the way we think about this is in a 2x2 diagram, which we've addressed before. And if we saw a business process that was both abnormal relative to the industry, and it was avoidable, but the company didn't want to change it, that would be an automatic fail of the screen. If all of the impacts are both normal to the industry and unavoidable in the sense that it would significantly alter normal business operations, that would be a pass, in the sense that that is how this industry operates. And previously, if we felt comfortable with the industry, it kind of implies that we're comfortable with some of the inherent impact of this industry. In a case in the upper right or lower left-hand corner where there's a split, we'd want to seek improvement, and depending on how, through negotiations with the company, depending on how serious we felt this impact was, that could make the decision as to whether or not it would pass the screen. In the case of KZ Noir, we felt that for land use change, that this was normal, as was limited use of fertilizer or pesticides, assuming that they're not using anything particularly destructive. For harvesting cleaning, water is still normally how it is done, so this would still be allowed under the normal rubric. However, if KZ Noir were to use a particularly water-efficient cleaning process, that might actually lead us to think there's positive impact. However, that's not the case with KZ Noir. In terms of non-hazardous waste, again, this is normal. And finally, the energy and emissions associated with aggregating and reselling would be normal. So in all these cases, we'd assume that while there's negative impact, it's not concerning, and it would pass the environmental screen. And it would proceed, and the impact case would have to be made on likely the impact it makes in the lives and salaries of smallholding farmers. That being said, if an investment were eventually made, it would be important to keep some of these impact risks, which we identified earlier, in mind in terms of ongoing monitoring of the investment. We hope that this has helped maybe flesh out some of our thinking or given another way to think about it. And hopefully you'll get a chance to look at the subsequent video. Thank you.